How do you plan for the future when the future is in flux? Realising that you only have one life is kind of devastating. Do you have a one that got away? And if so, how do you cope with it?
Why do we get so hooked up on love when the world is burning?
Well. If you haven't been here before, my name is Leena and I make videos about books and the climate and whatever else I feel like. I did a video on my channel called Agony Leena, or Dear Leena, where I asked you to send me your existential questions and I would attempt to answer them in an imperfect and kind of knobheady way. Speaking of knobheads, comment below if you used to watch my channel in like 2012. If you did, you might remember this background. I am staying at my family home for a few days. My parents are away on holiday and I thought this would be a cool opportunity to give you a bit of a nicer background than usual. Now you'll see that I'm holding this quite hulky mic because it's the only mic I've got with me. Forgive. Pray for my wrists. They haven't borne much. Steady. Getting to teenage humour because I'm in my teenage bedroom. Since I left home, my mum has put up this very exciting forest wallpaper, which I really gutted I didn't actually have when I lived here, but I thought we could lounge around my old house together and chat about life. So if you're up for that, stick around. Since I like being in the forest, let's do the first question here. Of all of the visions I have for my future self, I will only ever live one. How can that ever be enough? This is appropriate because I'm surrounded by all the things that remind me of being in a different phase of my life when I wasn't sure how it would turn out. And now I'm 30. I still don't know that, but I do have a better idea of it, or at least I know who the kind of person that I have become, and therefore I can roughly sketch out the kind of life I might have. But it's weird because in this room are also guidebooks to how to become a professional actress, letters under my bed from ex-boyfriends, and clothes that I used to fit into, and rough drafts basically of lives I don't actually in the future live. But I think there might be, and not to make everything about capitalism, although most things are kind of about capitalism, I find. But I wonder if part of that, because I often feel that too, is part of a kind of growth mindset, in the bad sense of it. Not growth as a person, but like growth as in an upward trajectory, always gaining more. Realising that you only have one life is kind of devastating until you realise that you probably only have the mental capacity for one life. Living more than one life sounds really stressful. That's what vampire books taught me. I actually kind of feel really excited about living, but I also already kind of feel a little bit exhausted, and I can't imagine how I'm going to feel when I'm 80. So I am actually quite thankful that we only have one life and it is usually under 100 years, because I know I only have really the capacity for that. And also I imagine that after about 100 years I'll have really outdated opinions and people will want me to die. It'll be time for me to move over. So I think wishing that you could live more than one life is not being at peace with your own limitations as a person. It's kind of like going to a shop and buying two shoes and then woefully lamenting the fact that you don't have a third foot so you can't buy another shoe. Dude, you've got two nice shoes, go home. Clark's is not the place for an existential meltdown. But I guess the other part of that could be haunting you isn't that you actually get to live just one life rather than more, but whether you're choosing the best life. And that is again something that I've shifted my mindset on, because I've realised that the life that I've chosen for myself might not be the grandest, and I might not have pushed myself to the furthest reaches of my talent or imagination. Although I'd like to do that in some ways, in the ways that I see fit. I'd like to push myself, but to not have what other people perceive as a huge life that is dazzling and dramatic and good, every single aspect of it is fixed, like relationships, children, health, housing, finances, career. That's a lot. It's just a lot of boxes to get straight. And thinking about the life that I am experiencing now and the one that I hope I will experience in the future, I can't really honestly say objectively that it is the best life, but it is my particular favourite. I'm attached to my life. I like the people in it. They happen to be cool. I like the clothes that I wear. They may not be objectively the best clothes, made out of the best fabric from the best designers that flatter me the most, but they are my particular favourites, and I think there is room to indulge in being partial to something rather than having to claim that it is the best. I absolutely bloody love my friends. I think, especially ones that are really close to me, I think are incredible people. Now, would I swear that they have impeccable moral standing under any kind of pressure, or that their talent is superior to anybody else's on earth? No, I wouldn't. But they are my particular favourite people, and I am attached to them. In the same way that when you have a kid, you're like amazed when they learn to walk, even though you know that most kids do eventually learn to walk. I am really excited when my friends achieve something, or they make a good joke, or they wear a good outfit, because I like them. They are my particular favourites, and I like to see them succeed in small and big ways. And I think that can be the same for your life. You're allowed to just be like, I'm quite partial to this, it's fun. And just like you don't really question somebody's favourite colour, you can just be like, oh, that's interesting, that's your favourite one, cool. We should be able to do that with lives without having to justify them so much, to ourselves in particular. But however, I will also give you my first reaction when I read this question, which is, how do you become okay with only living one life? I was like, books. That's what books are for. That's why I love them. That's why I used to want to be an actress. That's why I like imagining what it's like to be other people rather than imagining myself as other people. I think the creative energy that you have is probably a little bit misplaced, and it's more fun to just imagine being other people rather than worrying about the trajectory of your life. Join a Lamb Jam group is what I'm saying. So there were two questions that were pretty linked, and I wanted to recline. Oh, it's so hard to get comfy in 2020 and try and answer them together. So the first one was, how do I forgive myself? And the other one is, how was it phrased? Who is allowed to offer forgiveness? So these are really obviously linked for me because, well, the reason we often don't forgive ourselves is because we don't think we're the right person to forgive ourselves. We're taught that there is this one stage of forgiveness, and it's when both parties come together and decide, that was weird, but we still like each other. The end. I feel like a cat splaying out in the sun. I think before we answer that question, we have to wonder, what is the opposite of forgiveness? Like, what state are you in at the moment? And I was listening to this really good podcast. It was actually about being vegan, but it was about attitudes of moral superiority. And there are two states where you may be struggling with moral superiority. Either you feel shame or you feel contempt. And both of them are things that, if you don't believe in an idea of moral superiority, i.e. you think that everybody deserves dignity and respect regardless of their actions, which is different from facing the consequences of your actions or being answerable for your actions, then feeling shame or feeling contempt towards somebody else contradicts your actual beliefs. Like, it actually doesn't make any sense. And that doesn't mean it's not possible to feel that way, but it is good to know it's a contradiction of what you yourself actually believe. For example, there are people that have been really horrible to me in my life that are no longer my friends or I'm not in a relationship with, and I'm still very sad about that, but I don't have contempt for them. I think they're still worthy of dignity. I still think they have value. I don't necessarily understand their actions. So while I'm still confused, I don't honestly think that I'm angry, and I definitely don't think I have contempt for them. Does that make any sense? And because I believe that hurt people and people have learned behaviours. Like, you're not born into like a moral vacuum where you get a blank slate. Like, everybody has indoctrinated into something. I have to believe that they are acting on a belief system that has been given to them at some point, and it's not through acts of pure evil, you know? And especially because they're people that I knew very well before, I don't believe that they would act with intentional evil. So I guess I do forgive them, you know, because I think part of forgiveness is understanding why somebody did something. And I think, or at least having the faith that there was a reason that they did it. And there's no good reason. It doesn't have to be a good one. It just has to be an understandable one. One that you're like, I would have made a different decision. That is not a belief system I operate under, but I can see how this happened. I think it's when we see ourselves as morally superior to people who wrong us, as in worthy of more respect and value because you didn't act in the way that they acted, that like really that's a you issue. So I suppose when that comes to self-forgiveness, shame is the belief that, or I think it's the belief that you, as a result of your actions, you can be stripped of dignity and respect. That your entitlement to human rights and dignity and respect and good things is completely stripped, irrevocably stripped away. Most of the time, when I'm in a healthy headspace, if I do something wrong, even if it's something where actually I accidentally really hurt someone, or I realise that I've been really dismissive of somebody, or I feel like apathy has got the better of me, I recognise that those are shitty actions. They're things that I shouldn't have done. And they're a reflection of my mindset right now, the health of my brain, the internal wounds that maybe I still need to work on, but they don't get to the core. Like, no actions that I do can get to the core of having like a separate value as a human. And as we talked about, I think we touched on forgiveness before in the last episode of this, but I think the internet is really starved of that right now, and I don't really understand it. Like, I kind of think it's people are acting in contradictory ways when they cancel people online. So yeah, I've got sidetracked. We've covered self-forgiveness. Now we ask, who has the right to forgive someone? I do think that it's possible to forgive yourself even if the person that you have hurt doesn't forgive you for those reasons that we just talked about. So I don't feel like there's just one player who gets to decide being pardoned, you know, because assuming this isn't a law case, I'm guessing that most disputes, if we're talking about personal disputes, don't involve the Queen. She won't be universally pardoning anyone. Not that she really morally has the right to either. The person who's hurt needs to at some point go through a process of forgiveness. And that, I think that's quite independent of the remorse of the person who hurt them. I think they're kind of separate things. So I guess this question stems from the belief that forgiveness is one objective event that happens and not a process that somebody works through in their head. And that also doesn't mean, I think that sometimes we can assume that forgiveness means that everything is restored to how it was before. And I don't think that's true. There's lots of people that I've forgiven, but that doesn't mean I have to give them the keys to the castle and let them in the way that I had before. And that is really good if you can. And I think there's loads of different ways to heal stuff like that, especially if it's a partner or something like that. But there's a difference between forgiveness and restoration. And restoring things to how things were before a bad thing happened isn't really to do with forgiveness. I think that's more to do with things that come after forgiveness, like trust building and paying for your actions in some way, whatever that means, whether that's in monetary value or time or I don't know. But this question also got me thinking about how we'd practice that on a nationwide level, because how does one country say sorry to another country? I've been reading this really good book called How to Cure a Fanatic by Amos Oz, and it's all about the dispute is a very light way of saying it, Leena. It's all about Israel and Palestine. It's so confusing because countries are a confusing identity. They're something that we haven't quite worked out as people, even though we invented them. So to make one citizen sorry for the deeds of the symbolic country thousands of years ago is like a moral minefield, you know? And that's something that I would love to hear your thoughts on in the comments, because I actually am not going to offer any thoughts about forgiveness on a nationwide or kind of bigger cultural level, because that's a time. Nothing like hanging out on a piano stool for a bit of relaxation. How do you plan for the future when the future is in flux? This is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, as I'm assuming so many of you are. Oh my god. So we've talked before, I think, in videos about how happy little bluebirds fly. Focus, Leena. I think that... Oh, who cares what I think? No, imposter syndrome. Get out of me. We'll do the imposter syndrome question later. We've talked before about how you shouldn't be beholden to what your younger self wanted. If your older self has learnt more and wants different things. And even the things that you want right now, but you don't feel like you can plan for because the future is in flux, may already be things that in the future you realise you don't actually want. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't honour those things and try for them where possible, but I think mourning those things can be a little bit exhausting when you know, especially if you're going to try, you're going to grow as a person, and those things may well change anyway. What I like to do when I'm feeling like my future is in flux is I more like to focus on who I want to be in the future. I'm very aware of a lot of my faults, my weaknesses, and I've also been thinking recently about who I really respect. Not the people that I want the lifestyle of, or the people who have been given the things, the opportunities that I want, but the people whose personalities and whose character I really respect, and using that as my thing where I picture the future. And yeah, it's not as visually pleasing, I can't make a Pinterest board about that, but that isn't in flux. Like, my taste, my preference for character and what I aspire to, the kind of person I aspire to be, and how I react to external events isn't up for a vote in the Houses of Parliament. Do you know what I mean? Or a regulation from the World Health Organization. And that's where watching things like Contagion, which I thought would be the worst film to watch this year, actually was the best film to watch this year. For me, proceed with caution. But this is a film all about how a pandemic might play out in the future. And it was made in the past, but the recent past, and is based on fact about things that really could happen during a pandemic. And watching it now is very interesting because some things have happened and some things haven't. But I was watching it picturing what I would have done in these worst case scenarios. Worst case scenarios that in the beginning of April I was really starting to map out and worry about in my head that really could happen that didn't. And imagining myself in the roles of those characters in the film and how I would act, which actually weirdly relaxed me. And also, I guess, taking the emphasis off personal plans and looking more at the big picture. Oh, this really hurts. Quick, Lena, think of a wise answer so we can get up. So thinking, right, I really love theatre, for example, and I've trained as a theatre practitioner, and the ways that I knew of theatre being shown to other people and being funded, and the infrastructures that I had been building my practice around might be different in the future. How can I influence that? Let's use that imagination that I would have put towards my personal career and use it as a way to redesign the industry, at least in my head. Like, what are the different ways that this could work better? How do we go backwards and work out what we need from theatre practitioning? And how do we be a bit more pirate about it? Read this book, Be More Pirate. It's really good. It's all about innovating the systems of the industries you like and what we can learn from the Golden Age pirates. Mainly, it turns out, how not to be homophobic in the 1500s. I think just because you want to start picturing your future doesn't mean, I don't think you should stop doing that. I think that maybe the energy is more rewarding when you're worried about industry restructure, community restructure, and also just think about your character and how you'd want to act in situations that might not be great or would be great. Who can say? Ooh! Okay, bye. My teenage stairs. I mean, they're just stairs, but these fully are the stairs that I sat on a lot. Did anybody else do this as a kid? I don't know. I feel like stairs are a very central part of the house. I used to sit on them and think about stuff, eavesdrop on conversations, waiting for the phone to ring because I didn't have a mobile phone. The phone used to sit there and I used to sit there waiting for my friends to call me. Anyway, it felt fitting to answer this question here. Do you have a one that got away? And if so, how do you cope with it? In my notes, I literally wrote, let's unpack that. Because we need to unpack the phrase got away. It implies a chase. It reminds me, I mean, I'm not saying that anybody who uses this phrase thinks this, but just the phrase in itself reminds me of a very creepy Georgian count in a castle trying to capture a maiden. But assuming you mean two people that could have consensually have been together and for whatever reason didn't, I think it depends on your beliefs again. But I think that thinking about relationships that way implies that you really believe in predestination, which is that some things are potentially meant to be, and if they don't happen, then there's been a slip in the time continuum and something is kind of slightly wrong with the world, or that there is an alternative universe where you are with this person. And I just don't think that that's true. I think what ifs are very fun, but I think they're ultimately kind of a way of twisting your own nuts a bit. Do you know what I mean? There have definitely been people who have been really close to me that we maybe could have been in a relationship had things been different. There's definitely ones that I wish, my past self wished that we had a relationship. But at the same time, you think you like somebody independent of their situation and independent of their current predicament, relationship. We could use predicament and relationship interchangeably sometimes. The current way they are and the way they are in life isn't independent of their situation, and especially when it comes to timing. So say if one of you isn't a good place mentally, or one of you is with somebody else, or one of you lives on the other side of the world, and they're actually really intrinsically deep parts, I think, of who somebody is at that point. So I don't think that you can be in love with somebody without where they're at, who they are, where they live, who they're with, being an actual part of that, the thing that you love about them. And that's why it's a tragedy in the traditional, like, kind of Shakespearean sense of the word. It's a tragedy because it couldn't have turned out any other way. Because maybe you're the person that's in a relationship, you at that point in your life weren't the person who could break up with somebody, who wasn't ready to leave somebody else, or maybe is so invested in that job in another country that you have to leave and go, and that is a part of who you are, because the person you love is in a situation that you can't be with them in. Is kind of what makes them the person that you love. So yeah, it's also very comforting to know that almost everybody has somebody who got away. It's just that they were never running and they didn't get away. That life was never for you. It was just a possibility that your imaginative brain thought would be viable, but actually, obviously, because of what has happened, was not viable. It's okay. It's more comforting to be wrong than to believe that you've been smited by gods. I think some people are definitely more comfortable feeling like they've been smited by gods than admitting that they may have misjudged a situation. Can we talk about how nostalgic this wallpaper is? It's definitely the texture. Get some ASMR in here. Yeah. Our millennial wallpaper doesn't make sounds. I'm having wine because it's 4:42 and I work for myself. Here's to being in other rooms. This I haven't even drank a sip yet. Do you like my tripod? This place has more than 2 rooms, and to that I will drink. Me and Craig have been living in a 340 square feet since March, so don't laugh at me, I'm excited. Just let me get my kicks where I can, okay? Let's do some quick fire ones because I feel like I've been quite rambly. I'm a chronic pushover, but I'm trying to change that. How do I set boundaries with old friends? I've got 3 options for you, my friend. I've got 3 possible solutions that you can either pick one or combine into one super solution. Number 1, draft it. Send it to other friends. Make sure you've got the wording tight. Treat it like a PR press release, that you really mean everything you're saying and that you're explaining yourself fully. Number 2, it's okay to scream a little bit when you send it. Like I really struggle with this as well, and I think a lot of my early 20s was dictated by what other people wanted me to do or where other people expected me to be. And I've really learnt now to just write the message. Tell yourself you're not going to send it, you're sending it hypothetically, just to make yourself write it, and then plot twist, send the message. But it's totally normal. Well, I mean, normal's a stretch. I totally do this. I have the message ready and I literally squeal as I'm sending it. You take a shot and then you go and you've done it. I actually verbally let the sound out. Just a spoonful of screaming helps the medicine go down. And thirdly, send a voice note. No joke, I'll make a post-it note full of the things that I want to say in bullet points, and then I'll send a voice note, because especially in the age of lockdown, it's so easy to be misconstrued. When you don't have body language or things to communicate that you love somebody, you just have to say no to them. Voice notes take away the anxiety of being misunderstood for me, and I think they're often received a lot better as well, because you can hear in somebody's voice that they don't hate you, they're drawing a cheery boundary, which is my favourite kind of boundary, and that they are a person with other news. Tell them other news in the voice note as well as just saying no. Be like, oh, by the way, here's a fun fact, something that happened in my day. Remind them that you're a well-rounded, complete person with another life, and that it's okay for you to manage that on your own. When to reach out to an ex the first time after a breakup. He doesn't want to stay in contact, but he told me I can always reach out to him when I need him. I just want to know how he is. We are not reaching out to this man. Totally understand where you're coming from, but if somebody says they don't want to be in contact with you, there's not really a way to misconstrue that. And I think I understand the thing that's like need him, but I think somebody who doesn't want to be in contact with you doesn't mean need you in the way that's like, oh, I need you to come to the cinema with me. I need your opinion on this email. I'm assuming in combination with the other statement, they mean need you in like, you need them for a very specific reason and they're the only people that can fulfill that role for you. Like, they have a compatible kidney to the one that you're missing. You accidentally set them as your 2-step verification on your email address, and so forth. And it's also said in a place of, and I've said this to people as well, I've said like, I don't want to be in contact, but if you really need me, let me know. And I don't know if I've ever meant that. It's almost like a way of accidentally, very clumsily saying, I don't wish ill on you. I hope that you're never in trouble enough to need me. And what I found has helped with this, when I in the past have thought about reaching out to friends that have had a breakup with, or a boyfriend, has been sitting there and naming 5 people in my head that I know will be checking in on them and care about them, and that if they were in a situation where they needed someone, one of those people would step in. And it's also a humbling thing. It's like, what you offer isn't necessarily unique, especially if somebody is in a place where they need support. So after analysing what we mean by need and determined that you don't need him, do not reach out to him just to find out how he is. Just sleep well knowing that somebody knows how he is and cares about what he's up to. In lieu of this, I give you full permission to stalk his Instagram and his Facebook and find out maybe vaguely what he's doing. If it's just a little twinge of curiousness, feed that. No need to fill his inbox with unsolicited haze. I hope that wasn't too harsh. I'm kind of saying to you what I'd say to myself. I feel like gender equality isn't going to happen until 3,000 years after I die. Any thoughts? Relatable. But I raise you that you are not fighting for gender equality so that you get treated better. That can be part of it, but realistically, I think the beauty of feminism, and why it's feminism and not just you fighting for your human rights, is that you, when you act in true feminism, you act because you believe that it is wrong for people to be abused, mistreated, undervalued, or misrepresented because of their gender. That is what makes it an act of feminism. You're connecting it to a universal problem rather than making it about how you are treated, because that's just a you fight otherwise. So I get it, and it's frustrating. And sometimes it's hard to reconcile yourself with the fact that you may not be on the receiving end of your own activism, but it's very likely that you are on the receiving end of somebody else's activism who lived hundreds of years ago and you will never meet or know the name of. As an example, book that I mentioned in another video, there's a fact in there that's like, we have this perception that girls aren't being educated as well as boys in the world, which is still very true in pockets of the world, and this doesn't take away from the fact that that is incredibly wrong. However, things have improved incredibly over the last 20 or 30 years. Today, did you know, I'm going to be that person at the party that's like, did you know that the average man, if we average out the whole world, right, the average man who is 30 years old has had 10 years of education. Some people have had 3, some people have had 30, but the average is 10. What's that number for women? I'll tell you what that number is. It's 9, which isn't 10, but it's not 4. And if you go back 3,000 years, I don't have receipts for this, but I will make an educated guess that it wasn't 9. Optimism is so exhausting. So rather than thinking about the utopian future 3,000 years ahead, I also like to balance that with thinking about the dystopian past of 3,000 years in the past. Although there were some pretty fair societies, but if we're assuming from my name that I am descended from Normans, it wasn't good. So that was a very reductive, simplistic way of saying, I get you, but that doesn't make your actions pointless. And don't worry, the arc of justice bends towards slight improvement. Plot twist is, though, you may not ever be able to see the arc. You just have to throw a lot of wet tissue at the wall and hope that it sticks. My mum's knitting something. I'm not really sure what. She's abandoned it mid-inspiration. But having this ball of wool on my lap means that I can balance my mic on it. The visuals of productivity are here, but I'll be producing nothing. This question I both understand and it really confused me. Why do we get so hooked up on love when the world is burning? And I've just written, because you like living? I think that the idea that you can't be happy when bad things are happening is kind of contrary to the idea of understanding the value of life at all. Because if you understand the value of a life, you will see a disaster on the news and you will be saddened by it, but you will only be truly saddened by it if you understand the value of living, and you can empathize with another person and you can imagine
how great their life would have been had they lived, especially if they've died young. You imagine the person that they would have fallen in love with and grown old with. You perhaps imagine their children. You imagine all the human connections that that person had that are now being missed out on by the people who are left behind. So if you stopped falling in love or stopped wanting to create connections with people and be excited by that in the world, then you're perhaps on the path to forgetting the value of life. So the very nature of you being sad at events and really being affected by them, do you understand why that's kind of like confusing? Although I completely understand that we have been conditioned to feel that way. It's really hard to sustain any emotion, but I actually think it's healthy if you can worry about the future and enjoy the present. Even better, worry about the future and in light of your worry, enjoy the present. I think that's actually the sign of somebody who's quite enlightened. And that doesn't mean don't take action on the bad things that are happening, but in spite of the bad things that are happening and could happen, take moments of glee. I think that's very good. I think you should applaud yourself. There's also a bit of an othering, I think, when it comes to the coverage of a war zone, perhaps. And like, just in case this is your first time to my channel and maybe you don't know who I am or my character, I just want to like reiterate, as I'm sure most people do believe, I can't believe I have to do this in 2020, but it just feels necessary. War is wrong. I think it should end. I'm not saying that it would be a nice thing to live in a war zone. We should definitely fight for that not to be a thing that any human has to do. However, the othering of the coverage of people who live different lives to us can also result in the idea that there aren't marital squabbles or teenage affairs or hilarious in-jokes and people falling in love. They are also having human experiences while experiencing really shitty, genuinely terrifying things. And the fact that you're not experiencing those terrifying things but experiencing all the normal things of being human and falling in love makes sense, because they're having that too. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to that, and you know, I feel like 2020 T's and C's. Yes, there are exceptions when somebody is experiencing nothing good in their life and it's not very good, but on the whole, macro bad doesn't mean micro not good in any way at any minute of the day. And if you're super in love and you build a healthy relationship, you'll be able to fight to save the world together. That is so hot. Or at the very least, you find yourself in a supportive emotional environment in which you'll be better placed to serve the world. I thought we'd end the video with my buddy Malcure. I don't even know where to begin. This is a cement statue of one of the three kings from the Nativity that my dear mother rescued from a skip. He is not Christmas centric in that he's with us all year round. And I found it's better not to question things. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Agony Leena. I will be doing more of them purely because I enjoy talking absolute shit with you guys. I will take questions from the comments, but I found that some of the best questions come from Instagram because people can be anonymous. So do make sure you're following me on Instagram if you'd like to be part of the next. And if you want to be one of the lovely people that makes these videos possible, you can look into joining the Gumption Club for as little as $1 per thing, and you can cap it per month. So if you want to pay $1 per month, you are still in the club. We've got loads of little goodies and thank yous for being part of it, plus a secret Facebook group where we all have existential meltdowns all the time, and it's very fun. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Frog Snog out.